In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can pull together the equations, the graphs, and the tables that we've been learning about. Tables, graphs, and equations are what are called different representations of functions. I have that word here, representations. So when you represent something, you stand for that, you take the place of that. That's a way of describing something. So we've talked about equations, we've talked about tables, and we've talked about graphs. Today we're going to introduce a fourth representation we call a verbal statement. And basically what this means is describing what's going on in words. And those words will describe what we see in an equation, in our table, and in our graph. So in our first example here, we see that every day for lunch, Sam eats 2 turkey sandwiches. So he eats 2, we're increasing by 2 sandwiches each time. So I'm going to write an equation, and again, it's always going to start with y equals, and I'm going to have an x. And if we're thinking about how many sandwiches Sam eats over the course of a set number of days, we're not starting with any sandwiches. So we're going to kind of have a plus 0 here. And if x represents the number of days, we're going to multiply that number by 2, because each day he eats 2 turkey sandwiches. So 2 is how we're changing here. So we are going to multiply x by 2. And really, we don't even need that y-intercept. We can go ahead and get rid of it. So our equation here is y equals 2x. And now I can go ahead and graph this. So if I think about this in terms of y equals mx plus b, my y-intercept is 0. We're going to start at the origin. And now my slope is 2, and that's the same thing as 2 over 1. So we're going to rise 2 and run 1. So I'm going to come up 2 over 1, plot a point. Up 2 over 1, plot a point. Up 2 over 1, and I'm going to keep repeating that until I run out of room. Once we've got our points plotted, we're going to go ahead and connect the dots. Now we also want to make sure we label our graph here. So remember we said that this is at the beginning, Sam has eaten 0 sandwiches. After 1 day, Sam has eaten 2 sandwiches. After 2 days, Sam has eaten 4 sandwiches. So along the x-axis here, we're going to have days. And along the y-axis, we're going to have sandwiches. I'm having a hard time writing this sideways. All right. So now, one option is that we can use our graph to fill in our table. So I'm going to look at this point here. That's the point 0, 0. And when we think about the table, we can think about each row as an ordered pair. So if I look at the next point, this is the point 1, 2. We come right 1 up 2. So this would be 1, 2. 1 day, 2 sandwiches. We look at the next point, this is 2, 4. So we'd have 2, 4, and we keep going. All right, so next we have over 3, up 6. So 3, 6. We keep going. Our next point is 4, 8. And our last point here that we have fit is 5, 10. So that's one way to complete the table. We can use our graph and work backwards. So now let's take a look at another example. So this one, Terry has $6 in his piggy bank and adds an additional $1 every week. So he has $6. This is where we start. So we're basically starting with 6, and we're adding an additional $1, so plus 1 per week, every week. Okay. So if I were to think about that in terms of an equation, I'm always going to have y equals, I'm always going to have x. He starts with $6. So remember our y-intercept, it's the starting point when we graph. It's also going to be the starting point in our equation. And then if he gets 1 each week, that's what's going to be multiplied by x. And if we look at our table here, it gives us a clue for what those labels are going to be. So I can use my equation to fill in my table. And remember, when we have that slope of 1, we don't always need to write it. We can get by without it. So if I'm at 0 weeks, if I make x 0 plus 6, that's going to be 6. If I'm at 1 week, and I make that 1 plus 6, that's going to be 7. If I'm at 2 weeks, so now I do 2 plus 6, that's going to be 8. At 3 weeks, we do 3 plus 6, and that's 9. At 4 weeks, we do 4 plus 6, and that's 10. So we start with 6, and each week we're adding one more dollar. And I realized I forgot to go and do this on the first one. If we look at this equation, remember we had additive or proportional. Our additive was always y equals x plus something. Our proportional was always y equals something times x with that y-intercept of 0. So in this particular case, this is an additive relationship. And if we look at our second one here, this is proportional because we have that y-intercept of 0. So this is additive because we're adding 1 each time. We just add $1 every week. So now we want to graph. We can pull our labels from the table here. So weeks goes with X, so we're going to fill that in here. Savings goes with Y. I can't write that sideways, we're just going to go up and down. And now we're going to plot the points. So our first point right here is 0, 6. So 0, no left or right movement, and then up 6. Then our next point is over 1, up 7. Our next point is over 2, up 8. Our next point is 3, 9. And the next point that fits is 4, 10. So that's the other way we can graph. We can pull the numbers out of the table and plot the points that way.